Namaste. Amen and blessed be. We've been talking about mercy all month, and I think my first memories of mercy came from torturous boyhood games. We would find some way to hurt each other, choking or twisting of fingers or improvised wrestling moves, whatever it took to make the other person say mercy. And once they did, you had to stop whatever you were doing. I had no sense of the word being an ethical or theological concept. It was just a nonsense word attached to boyhood roughhousing. And the next, I think, I learned mercy as it related to combat. Whether it was King Arthur or World War II or Star Trek, there was often a moment when the defeated person or team asked for mercy. They asked that the rightful winner of the battle have mercy and not kill them or ruin their lives. This Memorial Day, I want to talk about a different kind of mercy as it relates to the military, though. I want to talk about our ability, our responsibility to show mercy to those who have served in the armed services, particularly those who lost their lives in the process. Tomorrow is Memorial Day. For some, it's a vacation weekend or the start of the summer. For others, it's an opportunity to remember the dead. Now, sometimes this National Day of Remembrance gets co-opted for political agendas. It's either a call to increase U.S. military might around the globe, or it's an opportunity to chastise our government for the human cost of never-ending war. Memorial Day is an awfully convenient day to make a political statement. If that's what you came here for today, you may be disappointed, though. I believe that using the emotional weight of fallen soldiers to bolster a political agenda is pretty reprehensible. It steals the real and complicated story of human lives and diminishes them into sound bites and tools for debate. I want to take a quick survey. How many of us have been close to someone who died in service to our country? Okay. And how many of us have served in military services ourselves? Okay. And how many of you have been personally close to someone who served? Okay. Wow. Nearly all of us have personal connection to the armed services. For those who served, you made it home. And for most of us, the person you know and care about made it home, but a lot didn't. Many, many brave men and women died in service. The difference between their demise and the survival of our loved ones is oftentimes a sliver of chance. The stories and families are not so different from our own, and their service to the U.S. military links them directly to each of us. After all, our tax dollars sent them into war under leaders that we elected. This morning at Tapestry, we'll reflect on the lives lost in military service. We honor those who died in battle. We also honor those who died after battle, those who returned from war but couldn't survive the hell of their own memory. Now, the truth is, I don't have a very positive reaction to the military. In my gut, seeing military uniform often reminds me of foreign policy that I don't agree with. It's a complicated relationship because I know the women and men wearing these uniforms represent a tremendous diversity of background and belief. Those people are more than a uniform or a policy. They are living, breathing, loving, diverse people. A whole lot more diverse than this community, actually. I'm betting that many of you have a similar dis-ease with the military. But you're in good company. Unitarian Universalism has juggled a complicated relationship with the military for centuries. As we advocate for human rights and justice around the globe, we long for more peaceful ways of creating change. I hope that today, even as we maintain an uneasy relationship with the military, we honor the individual men and women who have made sacrifices on our behalf. Now, without any prompting from myself, Jesse selected the Battle Hymn of the Republic for our recessional, which was a great reminder of our tradition for me. The song is a powerful testament to the moral obligation felt during the American Civil War, fighting to maintain the United States and to end slavery in the South. Julia Ward Howe wrote the poem that became the lyrics to that song. I hope that name rings a bell to a few of you. Julia Ward Howe. I preached about her last Mother's Day. Though it's less well known, Julia Ward Howe also wrote the Mother's Day Proclamation and was the founder of the movement that became Mother's Day. It was a peace movement, a movement of mothers speaking out against war. I had to look up the dates to see how this unfolded for her. The Battle Hymn of the Republic was written in 1861. She wrote the Mother's Day Proclamation 9 years later in 1870, after seeing the ravages of war, after encountering endless broken hearts among mothers and wives of soldiers. She became an advocate for peace. In the midst of that emotional journey, Julia Ward Howe focused on the lives of individuals involved, though. She recognized soldiers and mothers and the unspeakable loss they felt. So I want to read just a short snippet of that Mother's Day proclamation. She wrote, "Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. The women of one country will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm." I think Julia Ward Howe is the perfect symbol of our Unitarian Universalist juggling of the military and how we respond to it in those two famous pieces of writing. Today, our Unitarian Universalist movement has lots and lots of peace activists. We also have military chaplains, and we have active duty military personnel who know this is their spiritual home. We continue to grapple with our complicated relationship. Even as we do, we focus on the lives of men and women. And this Memorial Day, we extend our gratitude for those who sacrificed their lives. And we extend mercy for those who still carry the burdens of battle. There's a UU minister, Paul Sawyer, who told the story about his experience of playing taps, or learning to play it at least, and how that song taught him to remember well. He first played the song, he remembers, as a 10-year-old at summer camp. It was the same year that he had learned to play the trumpet. He doesn't quite recall how it sounded, but it's unlikely that he was able to hit the high notes at the end. How can you not appreciate 10-year-old musicianship? Now, he continued playing his trumpet all the way through high school, and the commander of the local American Legion invited him to play taps to honor the dead. He was called on occasionally to play at graveside services. And so for the next couple of years through high school, he dutifully played his trumpet, waiting for the commander to discreetly slip him a $10 bill after the service. Reverend Paul writes, "That's about all that taps meant to me for a while. It was easy to do, it got me out of school, and I earned a little money." But eventually, taps came to mean something very different. One day, Paul was called to play taps at a funeral for the father of one of his Boy Scout leaders. That day, Paul began to play, and this man that he had known for years as a wise and kind, old-school Boy Scout, stoic sort of guy, fell to his knees, overwhelmed with tears. Paul writes, "After that, I thought I might never be able to play taps again." That day, the meaning of the simple melody transformed for him. What once was a way to make pocket money at the local cemetery became a powerful symbol for remembering well. You see, once upon a time, I didn't even know this, taps was the signal that the camp was relatively safe. It meant that you were not under siege or under attack of any kind. It meant that you were reasonably sure that there weren't any enemy soldiers to worry about, at least as far as a bugle call could travel. To a whole camp of soldiers, the notes of taps meant that unless you were on duty, you could close your eyes and you could sleep in peace. The next time we hear taps, which likely will be tomorrow, I hope we remember the original intent of the melody. Not for civilians to somehow feel a part of Americana, but for soldiers to breathe easy for a moment, to feel safe, to sleep in peace. One of the few books that I actually remember from seminary was called The Code of the Warrior. I remember that book because it made a very simple and important point. Throughout history, it argues, every civilization has created a sort of different ethical code for the warriors who defend them. Warriors are needed to act in ways that are very different from everyday life. There is a different ethic involved. And to enable them psychologically to fill that role, we differentiate their actions from regular everyday life. Warriors need to be separated in a way. So the author looked at ancient Greece and the Japanese samurai, at Plains Indians and the Knights of the Round Table, and a handful of others. And in every case, the warriors were distinguished from the civilians they defended. They were separated in elaborate rituals in some cases, or what we might recognize more readily is the use of a uniform. Now, drawing on these rich traditions, the author sought to find a code for today's warrior. Because the physical and moral landscape of war has shifted pretty dramatically in recent years. As our military engages in unconditional forces on a global stage, using technology that no one dreamed of 20 years ago, we haven't quite caught up with a meaningful code for the warrior. We failed to appropriately commission them on a spiritually demanding task, and we failed to welcome them home once they have accomplished what we asked them to do. A more recent book that I read is called Soul Repair, and it sort of continues this exploration of the warrior ethic. This book asks the question of what happens when they come home? How do we as a society reintegrate those people who we've asked to operate in a different moral framework? How do we help them heal from this moral injury? Moral injury may be a word that some of you have heard. Fortunately, it's not something that we have experienced, probably. It's what happens when we're forced to act in ways that are counter to our own sense of moral compass and the moral compass that's been given to us. It occurs in a variety of places, and sometimes in the heat of battle it occurs to American soldiers when they're commanded to act in ways that violate their own ethical guidelines. Now, as a country, we want to support our veterans, but we hardly acknowledge the ethical and spiritual danger that we put them in. Yes, we know that soldiers have been in physically dangerous situations. We hear that all the time, and we see it in movies. They've risked their lives. They've undergone extensive classroom and physical training. We've seen that in movies too. They've sacrificed huge amounts of time away from their family and friends to be shipped to the other side of the world. We do a reasonably good job of recognizing these sacrifices. We could do a better job, though, at acknowledging and helping to heal the moral injury that some soldiers bring home with them. Now, the title of that book that I was referring to, Soul Repair, refers to this very specific process of acknowledging the moral injury of returned soldiers. Imagine this. In a very well-prepared and thoughtful environment, these soldiers are given the opportunity to speak openly and honestly about their own actions in war. The witnesses compassionately listen without judgment. And in the trust that's built, the weight, the moral weight, the rupture of personal ethics slowly becomes shared by all those who bear witness. The burden of unethical action is lifted from the soldier who followed commands, after all, and becomes shared by the broader community, all of whom are responsible for the actions. I'm deeply grateful that clergy colleagues are doing this transformative work along with military chaplains. It's healing individual lives and slowly changing the way that we reintegrate soldiers after war. In that story that we heard earlier about playing taps, Reverend Paul Sawyer said that it taught him something about remembering well. So on this holiday of remembering those lost in battle, it's worth asking how we can remember well, or at least try to. To me, the idea of soul repair points to the power of remembering well. First of all, having the opportunity to share whole memories is rare. It takes tremendous trust and courage to build an environment where we can talk honestly about the moral injuries that occur in battle. It takes trust and courage to share memories of the dead, memories that aren't sugar-coated or perfect. The healing and transformative part of remembering comes in honest recognition of a complicated life. Remembering well isn't about erecting a gleaming monument or singing praises of the perfect hero. It's recounting the real stories of a real person who did their best in the face of tremendous challenge. Now, though the idea of moral injury and soul repair, through the idea of moral injury and soul repair, we're also reminded of our moral obligation to service members. We as a national community are responsible for the ethical implications of warfare. How easily we forget this as Unitarian Universalists. The moral burden of the battlefield can't be left on the shoulders of soldiers who fight in our name. Young women and men dutifully follow the orders of their commanding officers. They do what they're told on our behalf. When we remember those who have died, when we think of those who still fight, we must share the burden of the war that they are fighting. Now, mercy invites us to see the human behind the role that they fill. Mercy invites us to see past a uniform, to see a person. Often on Memorial Day, if we recognize it at all, we heap on piles of symbolism about military sacrifice, or we respond with gut reactions to the symbols that other people feed us. Today, I hope we can peel back some of those symbols to see real men and women. The person behind that uniform has a story that's deeply connected to your own. Today, we remember the women and men who have died on our behalf. Even though we don't know their names, their stories are deeply intertwined with our own. We're part of the same American, the same human tapestry.
Someday our fights will be won then. We'll stand in the sun then, and bright after